Hello, good morning, everybody. It's your favorite host, Tim and Tim. We're back for another Tuesday at 10 a.m. episode. Tim, how you doing this morning, man? I'm loving the ambiance you got going in your office now with the backlighting behind the monitor and everything. You're really going all out.
Yeah, except I keep getting these warnings. But at the same time, I think if I could just play some Enya in the background, I think it'd be great.
Yeah, you got that comforting, relaxing music in the back, maybe some eucalyptus, natural oils or whatever those things are called.
Yeah, man, and I'll put this
Got to really
nice.
reach your zen over there.
Yeah, and my chair has a heating pad and it's got massaging features, so I'll just turn those on. I'll be good as gold.
Are you working or are you napping? Come on
It's
now.
like a spa in here.
Man. All right. So, uh maybe last week, it could have been 2 weeks ago. I can't remember exactly now, but recently Tim and we were asked to speak at Javier Hinojo's mastermind event, and we actually got voted of the entire weekend, and we got voted as the best presenters of that weekend. Not because we're anything special, but we're just talking about real stuff. Oh, look. Oh, hold on. We got to pause real. We got Enya's good stuff. Also, Swiss Groove Radio is awesome. I'll have to check out the Swiss Groove Radio.
I'll have to
Is that
check that out.
Spotify? Probably. I'm sure you can
You
just search it and it'll come up.
you know what would be like a real up and down moment is to like switch between Enya and then something like Pantera and then maybe throw in a little and then throw in a little something like good old school 70s rock in there as well. So
Man, you are just a mixed bag today. I don't even know what's going to come out of that bag next.
yeah.
Morning, everybody. All right. Morning. All right. So, Tim and we're nothing special, but we got voted best presenters of the weekend at the mastermind event. And truthfully, I think it's just because Tim and we talk. Oh, Dennis, my man, Dennis, you're usually the first person to say good morning, hello, but looks like Eric beat you out to it this time. But going to Pantera next week. So that's small world, huh?
Wow. Wow. Hey,
Yeah.
Dennis, I just before Tim gets going, I just have to know, do you still get in the mosh pit? Like the
Do you even go to a rock concert and not get in the mosh pit?
I don't know. Somewhere after
Hmm.
40, I stopped doing stuff like that. So
Oh God. All right. Try this around a third time. Oh, he said, sure do. Yeah. I expect to see videos and a report. I want to see you headbanging in there.
yeah.
So all right.
I went
So yeah. So our the outer ring. You got to get right in the middle, right up in front. God, I can't losing my
Well, let's
focus
just
here.
let's just
This is
stay on the
fun.
outer ring all day today. Well, how about that? Well, you-
Yeah, I'm a spectator from the outer ring. Look at those guys. All right. So we got voted best presenters, and it's not because we're anything special, but we just talk real stuff. That's kind of the whole premise of why we do this show. It's transparency and honesty, and we just talk about things that are happening in our lives, whether they're happening in our lives, happening in our business, happening to us or for us or coming from us. So I feel like that's why it was such a good presentation, and we're going to really condense it down here because we don't want to. We don't have enough time to go through exactly everything. I think Tim and I were up there talking for at least maybe 60 to 90 minutes through to Q&A and also through just like our presentation. But if you know anything about us, we don't prepare most things for this kind of stuff because it comes off more genuine. It comes off enthusiastic and more passionate when we don't have a script, right? We don't sit here and talk about, I don't have like a list of things that I want to make sure that I want to hit because we just want to talk about real things as they come up. And it's just a more casual conversation. We like to say it's not it's not like a scripted MTV Cribs episode, right? So what we talked about at the event was what we're seeing in the market. There were so many, hell, I'll let you in on a little secret here. We didn't know what we were going to talk about at that event until about 12 hours before. I get a text from Tim because he went the day before I did because I had some baby stuff to do. And he goes, I got it. This is what we're going to talk about. Tim, talk about that real quick.
yeah. So So I've been sitting there and I heard some people talking about like what's happening in the market and I'd had some conversations as well that whole week, just people calling me like what's going on in the market? Like are you buying right now? Like why would you buy right now? And then I heard it over and over again. In fact, one of the guys that I heard speaking, he was talking about something completely different, but he happened to let everybody know, hey, I was doing this stuff in '08 and '09. And all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, you were? I want to know like what's the difference between now and then. So, but that's not what his subject was. So he kept trying to go back to the topic at hand. So I'm texting Tim. I'm like, I know what we're going to talk about.
Jackpot.
Because that whole week leading up to it, Tim and I are like, what do you want to talk about? I don't know. Like, what do you want to talk about? I don't know.
Procrastinators unite tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it was great. It's like, so Tim Best has been doing this for, since the old age of man that he is, the last 100 years or so. He's been through the 2006, 7, 8 downturn. I know some of that was an upswing, but, the most interesting thing that he had brought up was there are signs that he's seeing today that he saw as indicators in '06, 7, and 8 before everything happened. So that was like a really hot button that people wanted to talk about and press on. So, Tim, what are some of the things that you're seeing today that kind of remind you of that same time period that you've seen? And also, how are they different from today versus what was happening back then?
Yeah. One of the biggest things I've been seeing, guys, is just lending, right? The way lending has changed. It's you're seeing some similar trends, but you're also seeing it different. And it's the same but different, right? So, like one of the things that we're talking about here with it being the same is lender risk profiles are changing quickly, extremely quickly. They're where you used to be able to go get 80, 85, even 90% LTV. Forget it. I mean, you can be in a great market and you're not getting 80. You're looking 75, 70. If you're in a secondary or tertiary small market, 60, 65, right? And then the DSCR requirements
Oh,
are
skyrocketing.
nuts, are
Yeah.
nuts. Like we're seeing things like 65% LTV max up to a DSCR of 1.4, right?
On
Which
this
basically means
1.4 in a stabilized product too.
yeah.
Not a, not a go, yeah.
What that means, and it's more simply stated, what that means is we'll give you 65% of your appraised value up and as long as it does not exceed a 1.4 DSCR. So if you are at 63% and your DSCR drops to 1.39, you're done. They won't give you any more funds. You
Nope.
can't tap any more equity.
They will
Um,
reduce the amount of leverage in order to
right.
make sure.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I would say is kind of similar right now is lending is getting tougher. Now, the reason I say it's different is because they're lending, right? So big banks are still lending. Smaller and regional banks are still lending. In '08 and '09, if you didn't have a really, really strong personal banking relationship or direct access to alternative lending funds like hard money lenders or private lenders, things like that, you weren't getting a loan. In fact, banks were retracting. They were trying to clear up their books. They were actively calling loans due. Um, one of the other things that I would say is a little bit different is you're actually seeing banks working with distressed borrowers at this point in time, which was not something they were doing back then. They were just trying to clear their balance sheets then. Today, they are actively working with people who are, behind or distressed in some way, shape, or form to say, hey, how do we give you a little more time? What can we do? Right. We don't want to own the property. So that's kind of one way that it's a little bit different now. Um, but you're seeing people really, really struggle. Which is, one of the places I think it's very similar is you're seeing people who made very, very poor decisions in the last, few years, especially with floating rates. One of the things we're not seeing these days is, the number of arms that we saw back in '07, '08, '09. But in, the kind of a similar, concept here is folks went into these floating rates right now. They didn't lock. And, in 2021, 2022, when rates were 3, 4%, hey, no problem. If I go from 4% to 4.1%, who cares, right? But what, now we've gone from 4, 5% up to, depending on the product you're in, 7, 8, maybe even 9, 10%. You're seeing some loan products with floating rates hitting 10, 11, 12% right now. So, if you were underwriting to something well below that or even half, I mean, just think about that. If you were underwriting to a 5.5 and your rate today is a 12, that's more than double, right? So that's some of the similarities as well, because back then you were getting arms where, the number, your arm would come due at the end of your 1 year or 2 year or 3 year period or whatever. And all of a sudden your rate just went through the roof on a property that you overpaid for and you couldn't sell it because there was too much product on the market. So that's kind of some of the stuff that we were talking about.
Yeah. The debt scenario today is just completely different than it was. I mean, truthfully, I was not doing real estate back then. I was a freshman in college, so you know what matters in college? Not much.
It's that.
Yeah. Taco Tuesdays. And where was I going to get to eat something cheap?
Do we get Natty Light or do we spring for the Michelob Light?
We actually did the poor man's Corona, which was a Miller High Life and lime.
No, we were crushing some Keystone
PBR.
Ice at the time.
Oh, and PBR. But yeah. So when I was a freshman in college, it didn't really, dawn on me. I didn't know really what was going on. But what I can talk about now, educatedly, is what is happening with today's lending environment. And that's not because I'm an expert in lending, but I communicate with people that are. I don't act to be an expert in that field, but I do talk to our lending broker. I know, Tim, you talk to our lending broker quite often. We talk to other people that are in the lending industry. We talk to other people that are syndicators or, just in the real estate field as a whole. Maybe they're not syndicators, like our boy Jay. We talk to him about a lot of stuff because he's been doing this for 20, 30 years. And he's got a different insight and outlook and perspective on what's happening. But what has come up in conversations as of lately is I can specifically talk about one example where a syndication group started a fund and the fund went out and bought $100 million worth of property. I think it's split between 8 properties or something like that. And they didn't purchase a rate cap in 2020. And now they are in hot water to refinance from a bridge to another bridge loan product. And why am I talking about this? Why is it important? It's important because what Tim had mentioned was that banks are willing to work with people because they don't want the property back. So essentially, how that conversation went with this guy that runs a lending brokerage that I know, he was talking about how they're doing a bridge to bridge product, and they scoured the banking world in order to find a good product fit for it. But essentially, because that bridge loan was coming due and they've exercised their extensions, they needed to go refi into another bridge product, which is typically it's frowned upon, right? Because it's like, well, you must be struggling with this deal if you're going from one bridge loan to the next. Like, what value are you adding into it or not? And ultimately, what the lending broker had told me was the banks are willing to listen to the story. And is the story that you're not hitting your rent numbers, your projected rent numbers, and your underwriting was wrong? Or are you not able to get access to the units? Are you not able to hit renovations? Are you not turning things as quickly? Are you hitting your rent numbers, but you're lacking in potentially didn't increase your insurance costs by 300% over the last 2 years, 3 years, right? It's taking into consideration the uncontrollable variables that have happened that can throw off your underwriting. And the banks understand that this happens and they don't want the property back, but they're not going to be very favorable terms, but you hopefully are not going to lose the product either, because when they were originally looking at this refi bridge to bridge, it was a cash in refi of like $7 million. And they were like, we can't do a capital call of $7 million in order to refinance this product into a new bridge loan. So they said that they did. I mean, they got a ton of no's, but at the end of the day, when they continued to tell the story and show that they were meeting their plan, they were just behind schedule. The banks were more flexible and willing to work with them because of pre-existing relationships.
Yeah. And And guys, that's one of the things that we talked about at Javier's event was, hey, listen, this is a really good time. If you haven't done it already, um, go out and make those banking relationships, those lending broker relationships. This is a really, really good time to develop deeper local bank connections, because those are the guys that are going to kind of get you through some of that, right? When you have funds sitting at a bank, when you have local guy at the bank that you can walk in and talk to and actually shake their hand, those are going to be the kind of connections that really help through periods like this. For example, they were huge back in '08 and '09, for sure. So, as a general rule of thumb, I guess I would say that those kind of relationships are always good to have, but they're really critical when you hit kind of times like, we're seeing right now, or maybe that we're going to see over the next 12 months. And get out there and make those relationships, and get out there and start making those relationships with the private lenders, the guys that keep their loans on their own books. If you don't know the difference, right? Some people, some groups make loans and then sell them off. Some, securitize them, that kind of thing. Some of them just keep them on their own books and they manage it in house. And those are having different access to those different types of lenders are critical, right? You got to know when to deploy the different tools in your toolbox, essentially.
Yeah, building relationships in the real estate industry is a full-time job between insurance and investors and sellers and brokers, whether they're debt brokers, insurance brokers, or property brokers. I mean, there's a lot of different brokers out there. There's a lot of relationships to build up, maintain, keep, and it's a full-time job, really, at the end of the day. So, we
Yeah.
we don't take that lightly, and we travel quite a bit, going to different events and meeting with people, and it looks like we're having fun, and we are, but it's part of the business of traveling and building, continuing to build those relationships, because you want, as one of our mentors has said before in the past, is you want to dig your well before you need to drink, right? So if you work on continually building those relationships year after year after year after year, and you never need it, great. But when that time comes where you do actually need it, like, you better wish you had been digging for a couple of years beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah. And Julie, really good point. And I think we actually mentioned this at the event as well. I'd kind of forgotten about this, but I think we actually mentioned it was call if you have relationships with those lenders, call them, let them know
That's right.
that
We did talk about that.
yeah, let them know that, hey, I'm an operator who with a strong track record and I'm in buy mode. And if you have someone who's struggling at the moment who needs to get out, and you're looking for someone to come and take that over, let me know. So essentially what I'm trying to say is call your lender and let them know that you're a strong operator, and if they have operators that are struggling, that you're willing to look at those
Yep.
those
Absolutely.
opportunities. Yeah,
Yeah.
because Julie, you're right. Nobody knows who's struggling better than the lender who lent them the money, right? Um,
Or the
so,
property
so
management company.
we're the property management company. So put a bug in those people's ears. If you're looking for deals, that's a great way to find them.
Yeah. So, all right. So that kind of segues into the next piece that we talked about, was obviously debt. Debt is one of the biggest components of making your offers. And what we talked about furthermore was, how are we structuring offers, and what's kind of been the sentiment with sellers, right? And Tim, you had kind of used an example of a deal that we're currently under contract on, that you were like, just kept telling them no, right? And tell a little bit more about how that transaction went, just to kind of paint a little bit better of a picture, to show the difference between buying a property in 19, 20, 21, 22 versus buying property in 2023.
Yeah. So, in 2021, 22, we were basically, as a buyer, you're basically at the what is it, the mercy of the seller, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
they would you'd put you'd put 100 grand, 50 grand, whatever down hard on a property after DD, and if you got close to the closing timeline or you needed an extension or whatever, they just look at you and go, nope. I'm keeping your EMD. I'm going to go find the next buyer, right? And they probably had 5 backup offers behind you anyway, at the same or higher price points, whatever. So that was very common today. So it made it hard to say no, right? Today, we're seeing something a bit different, right? We're seeing sellers kind of come to you and say, Um, I'm willing to negotiate. I'm willing to talk. Or they're coming thinking that they can still pull those same strategies they were doing in 20 and 21 and 22, and they're asking for, hey, I want you want to extend, I want an extra 20 grand for a week, right? Something like that. And that happened to us recently. We needed an extra 5 days to figure out some things that weren't quite understood at the time. We put the property under contract. We found some things during due diligence. There was about 4 or 5 days left. There was one day left in due diligence. We were asking for an extra 5 to basically go to our bank, make sure that everything was kosher. And the guy came back. He was like, "Oh, you want an extra 5 days? It's 20 grand." And I just looked at him. I said, "No." I was like, "You can give me the 5 days for me to go make sure that the offer I'm putting in front of you is something that I can close on, or we can just cancel it right now and I'll walk away." Um, and ultimately, he came back and was like, "Okay, cool. I'll give you the 5 days." That wouldn't have happened in 22, right? Um, another another deal that we have under contract right now, we went back to the seller and said, "I can't get lending on this thing. You got it's 90% vacant. It needs significant work. I can't get lending. So I'm walking." And in this case, our earnest money was hard, and we were willing to basically say, "Keep it." We get it, keep it. The seller came back and said, "I don't want that. I want to sell the property. What can I do?" So we basically made them a seller financing offer. Basically said, "Well, 100% seller financing. First year of interest deferred, et cetera, et cetera." And they were like, "Okay, let me go talk to my partner. I'll get back to you within the week." Right. So those are things you're seeing now that you weren't seeing, hell, 18 months ago, 12 months ago. Sellers are starting to come around. I think they're starting to realize that properties under contract for a week, 2 weeks, 30 days, that when they take it back to market, it's probably worth a little less than it was when when you put it under contract, or it's just going to be hard to sell. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, Tim, how many times have you heard a broker come back recently and say, "Hey, somebody wanted 7 million for their property. We went and talked to the market, and the market said no."
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Um,
plenty of times now. I
yeah,
love that statement from a broker when they're just like, the market said no.
right. Not Tim said no, not Vitali said no. The market said no.
Right.
Like, yeah, they didn't get one offer anywhere close. Right. Um,
Yeah,
so
it's happening more and more now, and that has really kind of impacted the way that we make our offers to sellers, because sellers still want, I'm a seller, right? I'm selling property. We're selling property. We're buying property. I mean, we're trading in and out of stuff all the time, but sellers still want 2020 and 2021 pricing. Yet, buyers can't get the debt that we once used to be able to get to afford those prices, right? So, in order to bridge the gap, we've been making a ton of partial seller finance offers, whether the seller's holding back 10, 15, 20, 30% of the purchase price in order to make the deal work. And I kind of shared a little bit of insight at the mastermind that I want to share with you guys here. And it didn't really click for me until I was on the other side of that table. And really, some of you guys out there are probably gonna be like, Tim, duh, like, why didn't you know that? But like, it doesn't click, and you don't hear it until you hear it, kind of thing, right? And somebody could tell you something a million times, but you don't get it until you actually have to get it. But what I realized was when I was selling a property is I am even offering this property for sale with potential seller financing in order to get the price that I want. And everyone's like, "Oh, well, cool, that's great, right?" And some people might ask why. And really, I look at it at two different ways. I said, first of all, I can sell it with seller financing and get yesterday's price, but collect my money later, right? Or I can sell it at today's price and just lose that money entirely. What's the better option there, right?
right,
I'm going to go with option number one, right? So I look at it this way, and I'm just using fictitious numbers here. But if I were going to sell a property today, for what it's worth, and I could get $2 million, right, because of today's lending debt terms and everything, that's where seller or buyers are willing to make me an offer at. Or if I had sold it 18 months ago, I would have been able to get $2.5 million, right? So you're like, okay, Well, or $2.3 million or something like that, right? So then you say, hey, I'll sell it for $2.3 million and I'll hold back $300,000 of seller financing to help you with your down payment. Down payment on a just over $2 million property is like what, six or $700,000. You're essentially holding back 50% of their down payment in order to buy this property. Now, not only am I realizing an equity move, right? Because I'm capturing those capital gains, but then I'm not going to be able to touch those capital gains for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But the flip side of that is those capital gains that I haven't been able to touch, they're making me interest, right? And I'm
Right.
making money on that unrealized. I call it unrealized because it's not in your pocket, but truly it is a realized gain. You just haven't put it in your pocket. But those unrealized gains are putting interest dollars into your bank as a second lien position or even as a promissory note position. So now I look at it this way and say, hey, wow, I actually got my price that I would have gotten 2 years ago. So I didn't miss the market. I was able to collect interest over 5 years on this $300,000. And then I still walked away with the $2 million that I could have just sold it today for and then not have realized that extra $300,000. Right. So it's like, it's just this really kind of aha moment for me is as soon as I saw it, I got it, right? But you don't really get there until you're in that position where you need to make that decision and it clicks. You're like, duh, that makes a ton of sense. So now that I've been on that side of the equation, I know how to speak more fluently to people that are selling property and explain that same situation to them is, hey, you're still realizing these gains that you otherwise would not have been able to realize. Because if anybody else comes off the street and make you an offer, you're not going to get that dollar amount, right?
Right.
But if you go with this offer, you will get that dollar amount. You'll collect some interest on the money. You'll collect the money later, and you still walk away with what you would be able to sell it for today at market rate. So it's a win-win, really, at the end of the day. And it's like, well, how much can I sell or finance? If I can keep bumping up the price, I'm willing to sell or finance as much as I need, as long as the price dictates, as long as the price makes it worth my while.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some really creative solutions out there, guys, to get things done. And quite frankly, like I look at some of these things and I'm like, I don't understand why more people don't do some of this. Um,
Yep.
because it's a way to it accomplishes a couple of things like that scenario he's talking about. It's a way to get some money in the seller's pocket today. It's the way for the buyer to take over, control of the asset, put it on their books and start, cash flowing it as well. But at the same time, the original seller is able to make some, basically passive income for themselves as well.
Hmm.
It really is a win. And then also defer some of those gains like you're talking about. You don't have to take them today, right?
Yep. And
Um,
and a lot of buyers are looking at what is their return on investment. Well, if you sell it at a higher price with seller financing, there's less meat on the bone, but they're also bringing less money to the table.
right.
So on a ratio basis, their returns are better because they're bringing less money to the table, but they're controlling a bigger asset, which has a bigger opportunity to appreciate more than a smaller opportunity. Simply because a $2 million property goes up 10%, it's $200,000. $1 million property goes up 10%, it's $100,000, right? So just by nature of owning a larger asset in the same market, you're going to make more money just because it's a bigger number, right? At the end of
Right.
the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you can make 100 grand off of nothing out of your pocket, what's that? I mean, infinite.
Infinite. Duh. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So we talked about this kind of stuff at the mastermind, and obviously we went way further deep into these topics and conversations. Uh, Quite a long Q&A process, just because it's relative stuff. It's interesting stuff. It makes an impact on buying and selling properties, and what we're seeing in the market, and we're just being transparent with what we're learning, what we're seeing, what we're doing in order to be successful, because we haven't stopped buying properties. We haven't stopped selling properties, right? So,
No.
we don't time the market. We just do what we do and then we sell it, right? We control what we can and then we move on to the next thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, all right. Well, hey, real quick, back to Dennis here for a second. Dennis, before you go to that concert, check out Jim Brewer's. Jim Brewer has a whole comedy bit on being older, going to a show with a mosh pit. It's hilarious.
I'm going to
Check
have to
that
look
out.
it up now too. All right, guys. Well, appreciate you joining in today. Hope you learned something. If I did have in the past, I have made a post before about how we've been making offers. If you comment, tag me in the comments, I'll tag you on that post so that you guys can see what that looks like, and in order to kind of give you a visual of how we're kind of structuring deals and structuring offers nowadays. So I take no credit for creating the LOI template. I got that from a mentor of mine, Tim Bratz. I just use his template. But at the end of the day, this it's showing you a real life example of how we're utilizing it. So
Yeah.
again, comment, tag me if you're interested in seeing what that looks like. So cool. All right. Until
All right,
next week.
folks.
See you later. Peace.
See ya.